Welcome back to another episode of Demystifying Self-Publishing. I'm your host, Alyssa, and today's guest is a powerhouse of purpose, passion, and unapologetic storytelling. Blaise Hunter, also known as Captain Communicator, is a self-published author, speaker, and all-around force when it comes to helping people find their voice and share their story. Whether it's through her books, her bold brand, or her real talk on stage, Blaise is all about turning life's messiest moments into powerful messages. If you've ever felt stuck, scared to hit publish, or unsure where to start, this episode is for you. Thank you so much for being here today, Blaise.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I would love to start off with just chatting about what exactly inspired you in the first place to start writing and what finally gave you that push to publish your first book.
Yeah, thank you so much. So it's, like anything, we all have a backstory and all of these things that kind of line up and lead to this moment now. So I'm going to rewind about 10 years ago, and I have a lovely, beautiful daughter. She's going to be 12 in a couple of weeks, and we had her. And then I was battling secondary infertility and loss. So we had 3 miscarriages, my husband and I. And at the time, there was little supports, little awareness, little talks about it. Like there was nothing. It wasn't normalized to speak about miscarriage and pregnancy loss so open.
Right.
And I was battling a lot with depression and postpartum of a colicky baby, and also just battling a rare illness. And I just thought, you know what, maybe I'll write through my pain to heal my heart a little bit. And so I just started writing. I took a writing course. I come from a communications, PR background, a radio journalist. So I had all those components. That's kind of where my outlet always lied, was writing. And so I just decided to write and be really raw and honest about miscarriage. And it was in that moment that I just gave myself freedom to say, hey, if you're going to talk about it, let's be real. Right. And I don't know if it'll land. And this wasn't about doing anything beyond writing to heal my pain and my heart. And being so honest in that first book just created this amazing path to be a writer, to have a business, to touch people's hearts with pure honesty and vulnerability, and allow people to come out of the woodwork, because we give them permission to say, me too, and this is my experience. And it doesn't have to be so taboo and hidden beneath the surface. We can really be loud about the pain of this and the realities of pregnancy loss. So that's the backstory of that.
I find it to be so admirable, because as we've learned as women and mothers, pregnancy loss is something that impacts so many people. And as you mentioned, it's something that is quiet. It's something that is often experienced privately and in moments of isolation. And through that, it can be very insufferable to endure. And so building that community and giving a voice to that community had to feel just so wonderful after not having that community yourself. So I really applaud you for putting your own vulnerabilities out there for people to read. Where did that transition happen when it changed from writing through your pain to then sharing that and publishing your book?
Yeah, it was kind of like, you didn't know where that process would lead. It was just about writing. I got in touch with a publisher, and they wanted to publish it like an indie self-published type of thing, as well as my second book. But so it was very scary, because you're like, okay, I'm going to hit print, and it's going to be all like your own stories and your own flaws and your own thoughts, and like, will other people respond? Part of that, it's like that first book was about my journey as a mom, my journey with self-image issues, and then the journey of infertility. And I kind of made it a 3-part. It was all of my journey, but all touching on those 3 topics that really created that feeling not good enough.
Right.
And so you can really kind of resonate with all women. It's like, whether you're a mother and you never feel good enough, whether your body never feels good enough. And then especially if you experience any struggle with fertility, you feel not good enough in that realm, because that's what women are supposed to be able to do.
Right.
And so I really wanted to just, throw everything out and be like, hey, this is real and I can't be the only one. Maybe I am, but I'm just going to share that experience. And that was the most beautiful thing, was that I wasn't the only one.
Mm.
But we're all thinking that it's a very lonely path, whether it's fertility struggles or just being a woman.
Right.
And the struggle is real and no one's really
Absolutely.
talking about it, but we're all going home bawling, thinking I'm not cutting it today.
Absolutely.
So let's just say, hey, this is what I think. Do you think this way? And I think if we all think we're not good enough or measuring up to some unicorn standard, maybe the standard is wrong.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's what allowed for me to publish that and take the risk. And then
Mm.
publishing it allowed for other people to share, like, yeah, you're right. I feel that way too. And part of that first book, and I know we'll move on to the second book, but that first book was the catalyst of permission, that I'm okay to say my voice, even if it's shaky, even if I'm uncertain what
Right.
people will receive from my words. I was allowed to speak. And I think that was the big thing of me coming out in my own voice, was that even if you're not sure, you're allowed to speak and use your voice.
Let's chat about using your voice and maybe developing what that authentic voice sounds like at the
Yeah.
end of the day. Because as you mentioned, you have now published 2 books.
Yeah.
So, how did you hone in and perfect that authentic voice and continue to evolve it through that second project?
Yeah, I think everybody has to develop their own, because we all have this unique cadence to the way we speak or the way we write or the way we connect to people. And that's our superpower. So, like, my superpower isn't yours necessarily, but there is this common thing to try to find that voice. And that was through that first book. It's being able to understanding when you speak to somebody, whether it's in person or over text or over email or over the phone, how do people respond to you? What do you say? How do you say it? And really hone in on that is your magic. How do you connect? And you can't go wrong with just being real and vulnerable.
Mm.
And then it's also then your own unique characteristics and your jam and your personality and how you speak. But like mine was just like, there's no perfect words. It's just the
Right.
energy that you put behind it. And if you can tap into the energy of like vulnerability, curiosity, and humanity, that's where people respond. And when you speak from the heart and you're be willing to, like, I always say layered cake, because you can't be walking around telling everyone your deepest, darkest everything.
Right.
So
Right.
like layered cake vulnerability is like, I'm going to add a layer here of a little bit that invites you to see me beyond my social media page and beyond what we all walk into a room with our perfectly amazing outfit and our makeup and our hair. And we walk in so confident, but I'm going to share a story or a share experience where I'm human, that's connective, but is a little bit of vulnerability there. And then I'm going to see how you respond. And some people don't, and that's okay. Then that's not the conversation I'm going to have. But if someone
Right.
comes back and says, you're right, I've been struggling, or this is what's been going on, and you're like, haha, we connected,
I
right?
found my people.
Right? And so then you offer another layer and you ask questions, and it just creates this free flowing, beautiful exchange beyond face value pleasantries. Because we
Mm.
get that anywhere. And I think people in this world are craving connection and craving people just to be a little bit more raw. And
Absolutely.
so once you do that, that's was part of finding my voice, was like, I think that's my superpower, is just being vulnerable and inviting others to share in that experience. And that strengthened the confidence to have voice.
I think that the ability to create connection is such a gift. Not everybody is strong at meeting somebody and taking that first step, having that first conversation, and then evolving that conversation through some of those layers.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you not only identify that, but also put a great amount of weight into the power of connection, I think is really important for a lot of us to maybe pay attention to. I think also one thing that really struck me as you said, depending on the response that you receive, you decide whether or not to kind of continue that conversation or peel back another layer of that cake, so to speak. Yeah. And one thing I think we struggle with a lot of the time as authors is wanting everybody to receive our work in the way we intend to have it received. And we want everybody to be our audience or our ideal reader, which is just so unrealistic. And it's okay that that's not the case. I think by being able to identify those people that you're able to make that connection with and recognizing like, oh, these are my people, that's who you're writing for. Yeah. You're not trying to write for the person that isn't able to resonate. And so it's okay to kind of differentiate between those two.
It is. And you have to have intention too. So it's really about knowing yourself. And that's the journey. Because I think a lot of times in this world, we don't really know ourselves. So how can we love ourselves and have a voice and be confident if we don't know or love ourselves? Mm-hmm. So it's really going back to the core of like, know who you are, love who you are, flaws and all, because nobody's perfect. But I'm going to build who I want to be and start taking steps to be that, because that's knowing me. And then that's loving me because I'm building that version who I want to be. And if you realize I don't want to be this person, I want to be a little bit over here, then you take steps to get there. And I still love that journey of that because I'm intentional about it. So when I talk to somebody, I'm really knowing who I am. And I also know when I speak, I'm going to speak with intention, with the clarity to connect, but also knowing that like quality over quantity. Mm-hmm. And I've had to realize that early on in like this journey is that I'm going to speak real, and sometimes real isn't received well.
Right.
But if I own the words and the way I say it, then some may not receive it, and that's okay. Because it's the quality of connection versus speaking and wanting everybody to love me.
Absolutely.
Because if I do that, then I'm watering down my voice.
Yes.
And so it's really important for people, whether you're wanting to write a book or speak or just be on the journey of self-love and owning it. It's like really knowing the intention behind it. And being a disruptor is part of this journey for me. And I love the cape and the sword and the rawness and really calling things out. But also there's this inner child version of me that wants everyone to love me. And the girl that went through a lot of trauma and rejection picked a career and a dialect of voice that really pokes people and disrupts and welcomes rejection. And I find that the most comical thing of this journey is like the girl that has rejection issues chose a path that really just stirs everything up and says, okay, now reject me.
I think that maybe that is part of the healing.
It is.
Right? Is forcing that exposure and recognizing, you know, this is something that I have struggled with or had some insecurities about previously, and putting yourself out there and knowing who you are at this stage in your life and welcoming that, I think, is just part of this journey that you're talking about.
It's amazing. And in the pandemic, I had a podcast and I interviewed someone that was an expert in conflict resolution. And she told me all of her story of like she had so much conflict in her life and was an avoider. And I was like, isn't that fascinating that you had all these problems with conflict and you became a conflict resolution expert? And she's like, I could say the same about you, Blaise. You're a broadcast journalist. You had no voice. And I had like an epiphany. I was like, how did someone just like relay that back to me? And I was like, yeah. I hid behind a mic for my career because it gave me a voice and because I didn't have one in my personal life. And I found that super reflective, that it took some outside perspective on a podcast and being like, yeah, I was seeking to have permissions and pathways for voice and expression because I couldn't express at home and in my personal life, right?
Right.
And so it was like really about this healing journey about rejection, about tapping into your voice. And even if someone doesn't agree with you, if you're owning it, you have this such beautiful avenue of voice and permission to speak. And this just touches on so many things about gender equity, about being a people pleaser and a trauma response of like, and women always being yes and take whatever you can get rather than speaking up and speaking loudly. And this has definitely been a healing journey to allow myself to own that and be vocal and really tap into the power that we possess.
I think that so many women see themselves in you or recognize their journey in the journey that you've shared. And that in itself is just so fulfilling, I can imagine, from your perspective. You advocate, as you mentioned, for women, for their voices, to find their own voices, advocate for women to own their bodies, to own their power. How else do you continue to use storytelling as a form of activism?
It's amazing because I come from a background of journalism, you realize it's the story that moves people.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't put it into a story, it's just more facts, and people get bored of facts. They want to connect with the storyline because no matter what story you tell, as long as you can tap into like an emotion that they feel, they can connect with the emotion. It doesn't matter if that story is totally different than their life. We can all connect to the energy and the emotion connected to that storyline, right?
Right.
And so early on, I figured I loved theater and I loved expression in that way. And I found the power of connection. Like when you can connect with a story and tell that story in a way that hits people's hearts, then that's the key, right? Like you can move people and you can influence them in a positive way. And when you can really unravel your own armor and masks,
Mm-hmm.
and I share like the commonality of humanity, well, that's power in a room. And I found that intoxicating. Like I'm addicted to connection and I'm addicted to the story. And when you can do that, you see the power in positive change and people walk away, whether they were triggered and didn't like the message, you know that it usually takes 10 encounters for people to change or be positively impacted. And so maybe I was just that first encounter. And when you're challenging social norms and you're challenging the way we think and armor and mask up, that's not always met with welcomeness. Sometimes it's like, who does that person think they are?
Right. Yeah.
But you go home and over your journey, you're like, that person was onto something. I think I'm on this journey of self-reflection and self-love, and maybe that person was onto something, but I wasn't ready to hear it yet, right?
Absolutely.
So then that's the beauty of storytelling, is like you never know where that may come around. And I've seen it. Like 2 years later, someone has this massive life change and you see them coming into their purpose. And I think that is my purpose, is being real, to share the journey of like, we all battle low confidence, imposter syndrome. We're being told daily on whatever portal that we're not good enough and there's something you can do to fix it. Well, why do I need to fix what I am? Like that means I'm wrong and bad and not enough. So I'm just like throwing it out and saying, now my eyebrows aren't good enough. Like when will it stop?
Right. Right.
So I just want to be, I'm enough. I'm always a work in progress. There's always things that I want to improve upon, but that doesn't make me bad or not enough or missing the standard. But if I can connect it to a story, I can maybe impact you to start thinking you're good enough and pursuing your purpose. Because if we could just have this world, every human in this world pursuing their purpose, like, can you imagine? Can you imagine the power and the beauty that develops out of that? And for the next generation, I think we're all in somewhat of an identity crisis because we don't know what our purpose is.
Right.
But stop chasing the purpose. Chase loving yourself so much because you find your purpose within that.
I think that it's incredible that you took writing through pain, writing through your journey, and that became a healing process for you that has since transitioned into your purpose. Your purpose being building those connections, helping women to own their own voices and heal their own internal wounds or overcome those struggles. And I definitely think that people listening are also going to be equally as inspired by this conversation. I'm really interested in knowing how you shift in-person connection to online.
Yeah.
In 2025, social media, digital marketing is so huge and such a large component for a lot of self-published authors.
Yeah.
And not everybody is comfortable with it. Not everybody wants to put themselves out there. But I often refer to it as a necessary evil. It's something that is required to have the conversation, to build the awareness around your product. How do you continue to build connections online and foster a community of real engagement?
Yeah, great question. I think, again, that goes back to what we think we need to present on social media or online and what really is a connector for humanity. And I think it translates no matter what, whether you're in person or online, I always go to my vulnerability. And I always just share a little hit of like what I'm going through. And prime example, I went to Disneyland with my family a few weeks ago and I battle a rare illness. So on the social media pictures that I'm sharing on all platforms, it's me and my family in Disneyland with all the beautiful backdrops and all the experiences. And it looked so picture perfect. And I felt like, okay, well, I'm actually not breathing very well and I'm in a scooter the entire time, except for in the photos. So all photos have me standing up and it looks like I'm in Magic Land. But then off screen, I'm riding a scooter on every ride because I am physically not able to walk. And I said that would be a disservice to me, my values, and my audience if I don't show the other side.
Right.
So I post the one picture, and I think that's what we're trying to get here. It's like it takes practice to find the way you present the information because I don't want it to be poor as me and victim and it's my identity. So I've had to learn, and it takes practice. It's just the way I speak and the way I present it, and I'm always refining to find where I feel connected. And when you connect with others, that post wasn't about the scooter. The post was about being honest.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so it was like, I'll just share a little hit. And so it's online. And you know how many people connect to that? Because we're missing that in this world. It's so masked up, armored up. This is what I need to present to get clients, to get business. But it's like, where is the real in that? Where is the flaw or the honesty that touches people's hearts? And you practice it. And you practice when you get the response that like you're met with connection. You're met with like, thank you for being real for a moment.
Right.
And so I think that's the key in this modern world of digital spaces is you can never err if you're just a little bit vulnerable. Here and there, weave it into the story, weave it into your work, weave it into your pitch. But it's just that little bit where I know someone in that crowd or in digital land will connect with the story of just vulnerability.
I think it can be really difficult for people to allow for those layers to start peeling back. And so when we go back to the beginning of the conversation, when you chatted about connection and identifying those real opportunities for connection, that's what makes being vulnerable a little bit easier, I think, when you know that the audience receiving it is authentic and supportive and open to receiving that information.
Yeah.
And as soon as you have that safe space, it's no longer just a safe space for you. It's a safe space for your audience. And that really allows for that two-way engagement and the investment in you and your projects and your thoughts. And shifting the idea a little bit around thoughts and thought leadership, which very much, I think, is applicable to you and the businesses that have since come after these books. I want to chat about how you have evolved your work as an author into the business that you have presently.
It's fascinating. Like it wasn't supposed to be a business. It wasn't supposed to be anything other than a woman sharing her own story for her own mental health and heart health healing. And my publisher for the first book was like, when you do your Facebook and your Instagram pages, write author speaker. And I was like, no, like I know I come from a broadcast background, but that's not what this is about. And she's like, trust me, you're going to speak about it. So I just took that step of putting author speaker. And once we published the first book, it became this invitation because it was filled with words of pure honesty that pierced people's hearts.
Right.
And I think when you get into a culture where we're all about facades and masking and perfectionism, you lose the real. It's all smoke and mirrors. And so when
Right.
someone comes along and goes right to the heart and says the most pure internal, like, this is my truth, but I pierce people's hearts with the truth, it kind of like, wait, what did she just say? Did she just get real vulnerable with us? Right? Like, in this world of all this noise of perfectionism. And so I think that's what was the invitation of, like, I think you're going to be a speaker, and will you come speak on this and talk about this and talk about pregnancy loss, talk about how my self-image is now impacting my daughters. And we all want our kids to change the world and be earth shakers and world changers, but we're not doing it.
Right. We're not
Mama
setting
isn't
the
practicing what she
example.
preaches. She
Right.
is feeling lost in the identity of motherhood or the struggle of being a woman or whatever that looks like for you. And so it was like really important to start talking about it and talking about what you do is impacting your child in a positive or negative way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where it started to build the business of, like, us speaking and speaking pure truth, and then also then consulting. And so Blaise the Trail Inc. was born. And then someone came up to me and said, well, what you do is really about being a fertility expert without helping people get pregnant. You're telling people how to birth purpose, how to birth self-love, how to birth so many things in your life. And even if you're going through infertility, we're not barren. And so I really harnessed that and started to, like, educate people on fertility in your life. We talk about fertile soil to plant, flowers and grow things, but we don't talk about fertility in our life. And it really stemmed from a quote from Benjamin Franklin, or most people die at 25 but don't get buried till 75. And he's talking about emotional death.
Yeah.
So you hit around mid-20s and you're kind of coasting, but you don't really find purpose or get hungry for life. And so you just carry on in a mediocre way through the rest of your life, and you just go through the motions of work and career and family, and you find happiness within that a little bit, but you're not really pursuing purpose and zeal. And so you die internally at 25. Emotionally, but you don't get buried your physical body until the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so I really parlayed that with, body image, and the whole world is on a diet.
Yes.
The whole world is on. And so when you diet physically for so long, and that's your sole purpose is to be skinny and be fit, then you're dieting emotionally. And you're starving yourself of purpose and gumption and hunger for life. And so that's where it started to, like, form into this business of really calling it out. And then by the time I wrote the second book, Captain Communicator, the first book, Heroine, was about being a heroine of your life and kind of showing up and standing up and saying, I want to be that. But then, like, 4 years later, I published my second book, and it was really Blaise really owning the voice and calling it out and being a human rights advocate and talking about reproductive health rights, which I didn't know with the first book. I thought I was just talking about empathy.
Right.
Reproductive health rights is a thing, and we're violating that in so many portals of our life and in workplaces and healthcare systems and society. And so this really tapped into purpose and fueled the business side of it, was becoming a reproductive health expert and really using communication as a tool to impact people and to also create positive change in systems with diplomacy.
Well, I love it. I think you embody this term that has become more mainstream, which is authorpreneur, where you have these works that have shifted into actual businesses and opportunities for you because of those works and how powerful they are and how much they resonate with people. And the fact that you took those opportunities and pursued those opportunities, I think, is incredible. Do you have any advice for people who may be looking to do something similar and take their works and now kind of parlay that into a new opportunity or a speaking engagement or something similar.
A big part of that is don't just write the book and leave it. Like, it is your story, whether you want it as a business or not, but leverage it. Your book is a marketing tool.
Mm-hmm.
And depending where you want to do that, whether it's reading in schools to children because you want them to have a positive experience with reading in words, that's great. Do that. Leverage the book. Call a school division, call a school, email, but you got to start putting yourself out there. And I think that's where things get lost a little bit. People are writers. They're great writers, but part of the book experience is then knowing how to market it and turn it into like opportunities. And even if it's just an opportunity of networking and connection, I'm not saying you have to turn it into a business, because every author has a different intent or idea what that looks like.
Absolutely.
But start leveraging the book to create positive experiences and exchanges. You want people to read your book. That's the whole point. So we write a book, we release it, and you're like, well, I don't know if anyone's reading or buying my book. And I'm like, you got to leverage it. You got to go in rooms that would be interested in that version of your book, whether it's, a fantasy fiction, sci-fi, or like a self-help or your own story, a murder mystery. Go into rooms that would be interested in the words you just said.
Right.
So go to libraries, read, do podcasts, do like YouTube. I did readings of just my book on my own YouTube channel, and then send that out, and you get into pockets where people are interested in the words that you say, and you never know what kind of partnerships or collabs that develop from that. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a business, but you definitely, if you wrote a book, you want people to read it. So how do you get people reading your words, right?
One of our longest tenured publishing consultants was in one of the first episodes of this podcast that we did, and he was debunking myths around self-publishing.
Yeah.
And one thing that he said that really resonated clearly, because I have brought it up multiple times since then, is if you're not talking about your book, nobody else is. Because how are they going to know that it exists if you're not out there pushing your book, having those conversations, or at least being proactive and sending out an email with a link to the book, pitching yourself to a library or to an indie bookstore? Who's finding your book? There are hundreds of thousands of books published regularly.
Yes.
You need to sort through that noise and find your space and again find that audience that you're looking to connect with, even if it is on a smaller scale, even if it's not this grand business idea that you're looking to pursue. If you want somebody to read it, as you mentioned, you need to be out there leveraging it and talking about it.
Totally right. And I think there's a common misconception between traditional publishing and self-publishing or indie publishing. And I think 30 years ago, the gold standard was to be traditionally published and repped by a publishing company. And you get like this huge advance. Well, I think that's really a misconception, because that's not reality anymore. And the table shifted about 15, 20 years ago, where you lose a lot of your rights if you're traditionally published, and you don't get to say, I want to go to this, event and promote my books. You're really under somebody else's umbrella of permissions. So I think a lot of authors and writers were like, I think we can take some of our power back. And it's a faster process where you can get your book out. And not saying anything against traditional. I think there's just other options.
Definitely.
Right? And whatever fits you and what you want to do and what you can do, I think all are great options. It's just what's best for you. But I think that a lot of people hear self-publishing or indie and they're like, oh, that's not good. I think I love it, because it allows me full permission to, if I want to go into a fertility clinic and talk about my book, I can, because I own the rights to that. So I have some control over that. And then I was creating a business with this. So then it really made sense to really hone the control of all my writings. And so that's really important if you're interested in writing, if you've already gotten there and you're wanting to write another book or pursue different options, is to understand where you want to go with that.
Absolutely.
And that'll allow you the option of which one I pursue. And neither are great or bad. They're all good. It's just that what's best for you. But also
Hmm.
don't hesitate on something that maybe wasn't the gold standard 30 years ago, because things have really shifted.
Absolutely. I would love to chat a little bit more about your self publishing journey. I also self published my children's book, and I love the idea that you just brought up about, you know, some of those more untraditional areas that could carry a book. You're chatting about fertility clinics carrying your book.
Yeah.
My book is focused on cranial helmeting in infants and trying to normalize that because my daughter was what we refer to lovingly as a helmet baby for a period of time, and reaching out to pediatric chiropractors, postpartum clinics, the helmet clinic that we utilized. So many places were interested in carrying this book because it represented a lot of their clients, or some of the service offerings that they themselves were able to offer to new mothers who had
Right.
infants that were experiencing torticollis or plagiocephaly or whatever the case may have been.
Yeah.
So I'd love to chat about your self-publishing journey, why it was that you chose self-publishing or indie publishing for both books, and what that experience looked like overall for you.
Yeah, the first one was such an amazing experience. It landed me with a publisher in the States. I had a family connection within that, so that was a beautiful experience. And I learned so much. And as I learned for the second time around, I made a really more intentional. I think I was kind of a fish out of water the first time around, and it just worked out in a very beautiful of divine intervention to land on this one in the States. But if I was going to pursue a second book, I'm like, I'm really going to do my homework and make a decision what I want to do. And I wanted to be with a Canadian company the second time around. And I started researching and I came across Tellwell and I was like, oh, there's so many amazing, reviews and positive experiences. And it just made sense. And then working with Tellwell was just a beautiful experience. I felt like it wasn't just one of a number. Like someone
Mm.
really cared about my story, cared about the release of it. And like you said, like no matter if you pick traditional or another way to publish, you're still going to have to market your book. Like
Hmm.
a traditional publisher is, you're still one of thousands. You're still going to have to take on the reins of being your own marketing professional with your own entity. And
Absolutely.
so that way is a misconception. Like I'm going to do this and they're just going to sell my book and it's going to be a bestseller. You still have to be your own publicist, basically, no matter what
Yeah.
direction. And so I knew that I wanted to still retain my rights and control because my intention post first book was a lot about fertility support. And so what
Hmm.
developed from the first book was a nonprofit that supports pregnancy loss with parents. And so with that, we give free packets across the world to families that go through a loss. And part of that packet is one of my books.
Mm.
So I wanted the full retaining of ownership, that I give freedom, that I can do that anywhere and I can include my book and I don't have to ask for permissions. This is a nonprofit kind of entity. And so I wanted to continue that freedom with the second book with Captain Communicator. And it's been an amazing process then to work with reproductive health rights, with human rights, with that second book, and being a fertility expert that doesn't help people get pregnant, but more birthing rights and birthing knowledge and purpose. I was able to be selected to represent Canada at a human rights conference in Turkey. So the
Incredible.
freedoms of that really allowed me to do that. So that was an interest area of me, to have a lot of my freedom. What I wanted to say was calling a lot of human rights violations out, and I didn't want anyone to mess with that wording. So I
Right.
didn't want to have to go through a checks and balances with somebody else that may not know the wisdom of human rights and reproductive
Mm.
health rights. So there was a lot of reasons, but mostly it was to protect my writing style. The editor obviously worked with me, and so
Yes.
that's vetted, but it's like I wanted to protect the message. It wasn't fiction, it was my personal expertise. So that was vital for me, as well as protecting the rights and the royalties of my own, that it all came under that umbrella. So that was why.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I would love to know what is next for you. What's next for Captain Communicator? What's next for your business? Are there upcoming projects or books or causes that you are excited about?
Yeah, it's been amazing. Like, I loved what all happened from both books. Like I said, the first one was supposed to be just my own healing journey and turned into a business, turned into a nonprofit. And then gathering information, gathering education, gathering life experiences, fast forwarding where I published Captain Communicator, that's where I honed in on the voice. Like, you can tell the cadence, like we talked about, and your unique dialect. You can see both in both books, but you definitely see this more empowered, not scared to speak version in Captain Communicator, which allowed me to really niche what I wanted to do. But it's all under the line of advocating for human connection with communication, intentional communication. And you can't do that unless you know how to communicate with yourself.
Right.
So that all stems from the first book, but then kind of threads the needle of this path, and then creating more awareness with my nonprofit, which is called Footprints Infertility and Pregnancy Loss Support Society. And in this time of publishing Captain Communicator, I wanted to then really harness that fertility awareness, workplace policies, and I needed to fundraise. And so I was like, how do you fundraise for a nonprofit? Well, I tested an event in Nanaimo, British Columbia called Women of Influence Nanaimo Awards, and it was a fundraiser for Footprints. And that was our first one in 2024, and I thought maybe I'd get 200 people, and we got 600 sold out.
Oh my gosh.
So we did an awards program to bring awareness to infertility and loss and reproductive health rights, and really harness gender equity that supported women and gender diverse people. And it was this beautiful thing that was so well received, where we're putting Footprints on a platform. It got aired on TV. And then we just did it again in February of this year. And not only did we get 600, we got 700 people sold out the room, and celebrated 136 nominees while creating normalization of reproductive health. So I think that's what the first two books was, a journey to kind of get me into laser focus that I'm passionate about reproductive health rights, about women owning their own stories and not being scared to speak on a stage or speak anywhere in a room and have your voice heard and be equal. So a lot of that Captain Communicator was equal rights.
Right.
And it really stems in different pockets of like how to really educate people and educate them in a different way, because, you know, gender inequality is nothing new. It's thousands of years old.
Right.
So how do we create change? Well, maybe I have to say it a different way to create buy-in. And so that's always doing that with my words, whether it's another book, who knows? But right now, yes, we're really focusing on the Women of Influence Nanaimo Awards and what that does for reproductive health awareness. And then also we just got new workplace policies vetted through an HR firm. And so this is groundbreaking, because there's no workplace policies anywhere that has language about what happens if one of your employees has a miscarriage at work or a loss. And so that's what we're moving forward on. Part of being a Captain Communicator is calling out things that are, you know, in violation of it. A basic human right is that I had a miscarriage at work, and I went home and changed and came back for the afternoon and worked, actively miscarrying. And I think that's wrong. And I'm wanting to right that wrong by creating language in employee handbooks that says we're a safe workplace. And we have resources, and we know that everyone in our workforce comes from a family or a version of a family. And yet we're not talking about having a family-friendly workplace. And that's a gender equity issue of like someone that's going through an active loss at your workplace, and you're not being loud about that we're supportive and here's a resource tool.
Right.
So that's what I'm basically, where I'm very passionate about it. And all of my writing journeys and books have led me up to this moment.
You talked early on about purpose, and I think it's safe to say that you are very much honing in on that purpose through all of this work. And I just love how something so healing for yourself has come full circle to be something so healing for so many others in the way of supporting people through loss in the workplace, as an example, and shining a light on reproductive health rights. I think that it's so incredibly powerful and very moving. And so I thank you for all of the work that you've done there. Many people will benefit from it. And knowing that you have played such an instrumental part in bringing that support to such a vast number of people who have experienced pregnancy loss is absolutely incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think it's what people think of, like, I don't know what to write about. And I always just say, like, your pain is your gift. It's your zone of genius. And it could be your physical pain, you know, if you've had knee surgery or if you had this, or your emotional pain. If you can tap in to like that pain point and turn it into your purpose and your gift for others, that's the zone of genius. That's what you write about. That's what you do. You belong to be seen, to be heard, and to make your mark on this world. So whatever you do, use your voice for good, to connect and test that with people's hearts. And just, that's the purpose of life. That's the purpose of humanity, is to connect and to walk away feeling fueled by human connection. So whatever you do in life, that's what you should hone in on, the point of connecting with people, your words and your voice. So be a captain communicator.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Blaise, and thank you to everybody listening. Please be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, or you can watch the full episode on YouTube. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank
Bye.
you.